The floating palace of Lumina Prime shimmered like a jewel against the endless blackness of space. Its crystalline spires reflected light from nearby stars, casting prismatic hues across the gathering crowd below. Nobles from across the galaxy had arrived for the Celestial Summit, an event held once every century to discuss alliances, trade agreements, and, most importantly, the selection of a royal consort for Princess Calith of the Vaylari. Calith stood at the edge of the grand balcony overlooking the assembly hall. Her translucent form sparkled faintly with veins of radiant energy pulsing beneath her skin, marking her as one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Yet, despite her regal appearance, she felt anything but majestic. Her mind was heavy with thoughts of duty and tradition, two forces that seemed determined to dictate every aspect of her life. "Princess," called a voice behind her. It was Chancellor Veros, her uncle and current regent of the Vaylari Empire. His tone was calm but firm, his crystalline eyes gleaming with authority. "You must prepare yourself. Today is not just about ceremony. It's about securing our future." Calith turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Securing our future, or maintaining the past?" she asked softly, though there was a sharpness to her words. Veros frowned slightly but said nothing. He didn't need to. Calith already knew what he would say, that traditions were sacred, that they kept their people strong, that love was irrelevant compared to the needs of the Empire. But deep down, Calith couldn't help but feel suffocated by it all. She longed for something more than arranged unions and calculated politics. As the summit began, dignitaries from various species took turns presenting themselves before the throne. Each candidate brought gifts and promises, rare minerals, advanced technologies, even pledges of military support. Yet none of them stirred any emotion within Calith. They were all so predictable. Then came the humans. A delegation led by Captain Alias Drake entered the hall, their presence unexpected yet undeniable. Unlike the elegant attire of the other attendees, the humans wore simple uniforms patched together after surviving a crash on one of Vaylor's moons. Their leader, Elias, stepped forward awkwardly, bowing deeply before the princess. His dark hair was tousled, his face lined with fatigue, but his hazel eyes burned with determination. "We are grateful for your hospitality, Your Highness," Elias said, his voice steady despite the translator device clipped to his collar. "We come with no riches or armies, only gratitude and hope." Calith tilted her head curiously. Hope. What could these fragile creatures possibly offer her people? And yet something about Elias intrigued her. There was a raw honesty in his gaze, a vulnerability absent in the polished facades of the other nobles. For the first time that day, Calith felt a flicker of interest, not in the man himself, but in the possibilities he represented. When the ceremony ended, Calith lingered on the balcony, watching as the delegates dispersed. Her thoughts drifted back to Elias. Who was this human who dared to stand among gods? Why did she find herself drawn to someone so different from her own kind? Little did she know, this fleeting curiosity would soon set into motion events that would change not only her life, but the fate of entire galaxies. The rebellion's fleet gathered in the shadow of a massive asteroid belt, its jagged rocks providing cover, as ships from across the galaxy assembled for the assault on Lumina Prime. It was an eclectic armada. Human vessels patched together with salvaged parts, sleek Vaylari cruisers piloted by defectors, and alien crafts that glowed with strange energy. At the heart of it all was the Eclipse Asterisk, the flagship commandeered by Calith and Elias. Its hull bore scars from earlier skirmishes, but its engines thrummed with determination. Calith stood on the bridge, her radiant form casting soft light over the bustling crew. She wore armor forged from crystalline alloys, a gift from the artisans of Nyx 7 who had pledged their support. Her eyes scanned the holographic display, showing the layout of Lumina Prime's defenses, a labyrinthine network of shields and turrets designed to repel any invasion. Breaking through would be nearly impossible, but Calith refused to entertain doubt. Beside her, Elias studied tactical readouts, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We'll need to disable the shield generators first," he said, pointing to key locations around the palace. "If we can take them out, our ground forces will have a chance to breach the perimeter." Caliph nodded. "I'll lead the strike team targeting the main generator. You coordinate the fleet's attack from here." Elias turned to protest, but one look at her resolute expression silenced him. He knew better than to argue when she set her mind on something. Instead, he gripped her arm gently. "Just come back, okay? We're not doing this so you can get yourself killed." A faint smile touched her lips. "I promise nothing reckless. But I won't let fear stop me either." As the fleet launched into battle, chaos erupted across the void. Varos's forces were formidable, their ships armed with cutting-edge weaponry capable of tearing through lesser vessels. Explosions lit up the darkness as fighters clashed, debris spiraling into the void. On board the Eclipse Asterisk, Elias directed the assault with precision, calling out orders to his captains while monitoring damage reports. Each hit to their shields sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through him, but he remained focused, channeling every ounce of his training and resolve. Meanwhile, Caliph led her strike team toward the primary shield generator. Flying low to avoid detection, their shuttle skimmed past enemy patrols before landing in a secluded alcove. The team disembarked silently, moving swiftly through the crystalline corridors of Lumina Prime. Caliph's telepathic abilities allowed her to sense guards ahead, guiding her companions around ambushes and traps. When they reached the generator chamber, they encountered heavy resistance. Valari soldiers poured into the room, their weapons blazing with lethal energy. Caliph raised her hands, unleashing a wave of telekinetic force that sent enemies sprawling. Her teammates followed up with precise shots, taking down stragglers as they advanced. In the midst of the firefight, Chancellor Varos appeared, flanked by elite guards. His crystalline form gleamed with malice as he strode forward. "You truly believe your little rebellion will succeed?" he sneered. "You are no empress, Caliph. You're a traitor." Caliph faced him without flinching. "And you are no leader, uncle. You've ruled through fear and oppression for too long. It ends today." With a roar of fury, Varos attacked, his body pulsing with raw energy. The two clashed in a dazzling display of power, their forms glowing brighter with each strike. Caliph fought with everything she had, drawing strength from the memory of Elias's unwavering support and the countless allies who had joined their cause. Finally, with a surge of determination, she unleashed a concentrated blast of energy that shattered Varos's defenses, sending him crashing to the ground. Defeated, Varos stared up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll destroy us all." "No," Caliph replied firmly. "I'm saving us." With the shield generator disabled, the rebel forces stormed the palace. By the time Elias arrived to join Caliph, the battle was won. Together, they stood amidst the wreckage, knowing the hardest part still lay ahead, rebuilding what had been broken. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of triumph, holding each other close under the shimmering light of victory. The palace erupted into chaos as news of Elias's arrest spread like wildfire. Caliph was summoned to the Grand Hall, where Chancellor Varos awaited her, flanked by a phalanx of guards. The room was cold and sterile, its crystalline walls reflecting the tension in the air. Caliph entered with measured steps, her radiant form glowing brighter than usual, a sign of her simmering anger. "Caliph," Varos began, his voice icy but controlled. "You have brought shame upon our family and endangered the stability of this empire. Your association with that human cannot continue." Caliph stopped several paces away from him, her chin lifted defiantly. "Elias has done nothing wrong. He proved himself during the trial, more than any of your suitors ever could." Varos' expression darkened. "This is not about proving worthiness. It's about preserving the integrity of our bloodline. You are to be empress one day, and you will marry someone who strengthens our position, not weakens it." "Weaken it?" Caliph shot back, her voice rising. How does embracing new ideas weaken us? How does learning from others make us lesser? Or are you too afraid to admit that change might actually save us? Her words struck a nerve. Veros stepped closer, his towering form looming over her. Enough. I will not tolerate insubordination. If you refuse to see reason, then drastic measures must be taken. Captain Drake will remain imprisoned until he can be deported, and you will choose a proper consort immediately. Kelith clenched her fists, her body pulsing with energy. She had always respected her uncle, even when she disagreed with him. But now, all she felt was betrayal. You're no better than the predators in the Crystal Forest, she spat. At least they fight for survival. You only fight to maintain control. Without another word, she turned on her heel and strode out of the hall, her mind racing. She knew Veros wouldn't hesitate to carry out his threats, but she also knew she couldn't let Elias suffer for her defiance. That night, under the cover of darkness, Calith enacted a plan she'd been considering since their return from the trial. She slipped through secret passages within the palace, avoiding patrols and using her telepathic abilities to sense nearby guards. When she reached the detention wing, she found Elias sitting quietly in his cell, his face pale but resolute. His eyes widened as he saw her approach. "Calith?" he whispered, standing up quickly. "What are you doing here?" "I'm getting you out," she said firmly, pressing her hand against the energy barrier locking the cell. With a surge of focused power, she disabled the mechanism, and the barrier dissipated. Elias stepped out cautiously, looking around as if expecting an ambush. "This is crazy," he muttered. "If they catch you." "They won't," she interrupted. "Not if we move fast. Trust me." Together, they made their way through hidden corridors, navigating the labyrinthine structure of Lumina Prime. Along the way, Calith explained her plan. They would escape to the asteroid colony of Nix 7, a remote outpost known for harboring fugitives and rebels. It wasn't safe, but it was far enough from Valeri influence to give them time to regroup. As they prepared to board a stolen transport ship, alarms blared throughout the palace. Guards swarmed the hangar bay, weapons drawn. Calith raised her hands, creating a shimmering shield to hold them off while Elias sprinted toward the cockpit. "Go," she shouted, her voice strained with effort. "I'll hold them off." "No," Elias yelled back, hesitating near the hatch. "I'm not leaving without you." "You have to," she insisted, her glow flickering as the strain grew unbearable. "Believe in me, Elias. We'll meet again. I promise." Reluctantly, Elias climbed aboard and activated the engines. As the ship lifted off, Calith lowered her shield just long enough to send a final burst of energy toward the pursuing guards, giving the vessel precious seconds to escape. Then, exhausted and surrounded, she surrendered. Back in the palace, Veros watched footage of the escape with barely concealed rage. Turning to his advisors, he issued a single command: "Find them. Bring them back, or destroy them. I don't care which." For the first time in centuries, open rebellion loomed on the horizon. And though separated by light years, Calith and Elias shared the same resolve. They would fight for each other, for freedom, and for a future neither tradition nor tyranny could dictate. The asteroid colony of Nix 7 was a chaotic sprawl of makeshift structures and bustling markets, where beings from across the galaxy gathered to trade goods, share stories, and hide from those who sought them. To Elias, it felt like stepping into another world, one far removed from the pristine opulence of Lumina Prime. The air was thick with the scent of oil and spices, and the constant hum of alien languages created an almost musical cacophony. It wasn't safe, but it was alive in a way that resonated deeply with him. Elias spent his first few days on Nix 7 consumed by guilt and worry. Calith had sacrificed everything to save him: her freedom, her position, possibly even her life. And now she was alone, facing whatever punishment Veros had devised. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing in the hangar bay, her radiant form glowing brighter than ever as she fought to give him a chance at escape. He couldn't let her down. But survival came first. With help from sympathetic traders and rogue engineers, Elias began piecing together a network of allies. Many of them were outcasts themselves, species oppressed or marginalized by the Velari Empire. When Elias shared Calith's vision of unity and equality, they listened intently. Some scoffed, dismissing the idea as naive, but others saw hope in his words. "She defied her own uncle for you," said Rin, a grizzled mechanic with cybernetic arms who ran one of the colony's repair shops. "That says something about her character, and yours." Rin became one of Elias's closest confidants, helping him gather resources and spread word of their cause. Slowly, a coalition began to form, not just among humans, but among disenfranchised groups eager for change. They called themselves the Nexus Alliance, united not by blood or treaties, but by a shared desire for justice. Meanwhile, back on Lumina Prime, Calith endured her imprisonment with quiet dignity. Her cell was small and barren, its crystalline walls designed to suppress her telepathic abilities. Yet despite the isolation, her resolve only grew stronger. She used the time to reflect on her choices, finding solace in the knowledge that Elias was safe and working toward their shared dream. Her captivity didn't go unnoticed. Word of her arrest spread quickly, sparking outrage among factions within the court who had long resented Chancellor Veros' iron grip on power. Some nobles secretly reached out to Calith, pledging their support if she could find a way to reclaim her throne. Others sent coded messages to Elias, offering aid in exchange for promises of reform. One night, under the cover of darkness, a group of loyal guards smuggled Calith out of her cell. Dressed in plain robes to conceal her identity, she slipped through hidden passages until she reached a waiting transport ship. On board, she found Captain Myra, a trusted ally who had served her family for decades. "We're taking you to Nix 7, Myra explained as the ship launched into orbit. "Your human is there, gathering forces. Together, you can finish what you started." When Calith arrived on Nix 7, Elias barely recognized her at first. Her once pristine appearance was marred by exhaustion, her glow dimmed but still unmistakable. But when their eyes met, all the pain and fear melted away. Without hesitation, Elias crossed the room and pulled her into a tight embrace. "You shouldn't have come," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "It's too dangerous. And leave you to face this alone." Calith replied softly, pulling back to look at him. "I told you I'd fight for us, and I meant it." With Calith's return, the Nexus Alliance gained new momentum. Using her diplomatic skills and charisma, she rallied the disparate groups, forging bonds between species that had never trusted each other before. Elias took charge of logistics, coordinating supply lines and tactical plans while ensuring everyone stayed focused on their goal, overthrowing Veros and restoring balance to the Empire. As weeks turned into months, their efforts bore fruit. Ships from across the galaxy joined their fleet, carrying volunteers willing to risk everything for a better future. Among them were defectors from the Velari military, soldiers disillusioned by Veros' tyranny. Their insider knowledge proved invaluable, giving the Alliance a strategic edge. But victory wouldn't come easily. Veros had declared them traitors, dispatching fleets to hunt them down. Skirmishes broke out in distant star systems, testing the strength of the fledgling rebellion. Through it all, Calith and Elias stood side by side, their bond unshakable. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," Calith reminded Elias one evening as they studied star charts aboard their flagship. "We're fighting for every being who's ever been told they're less than worthy." Elias nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "Then let's make sure we win." The return from the trial of sovereignty should have been a moment of triumph for Princess Calith. She had faced unimaginable dangers and emerged victorious, proving her strength and resolve to both herself and her people. But as she and Elias stepped back into the opulent halls of Lumina Prime, they were met not with celebration but with cold stares and whispered accusations. Courtiers gathered in clusters, their crystalline forms glowing faintly as they exchanged hushed words about the princess's audacity. A human. They couldn't fathom why Caliph would choose such an outsider over one of their own noble elites. Even among her loyal guards, there was unease, a sense that she had crossed a line no Valeri ruler ever dared to approach. Caliph ignored them all. Her focus remained on Elias, who walked beside her with quiet determination, despite the weight of disapproving gazes. Though he didn't fully understand the intricacies of Valeri politics, he could feel the tension thickening the air around them. He glanced at Caliph, seeing the steely resolve in her eyes, and knew she wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. That evening, Caliph invited Elias to her private chambers, a sanctuary high above the palace where shimmering walls reflected the light of distant stars. It was here that she revealed something she had kept hidden, even from those closest to her. The truth about the stagnation plaguing the Valeri Empire. "We've become complacent," she began, pacing slowly across the room. Her voice was soft, but laced with frustration. "For centuries, we've prided ourselves on our superiority, our technology, our abilities, our perfection. But what has it brought us? Stagnation. Fear of change. We cling to traditions because they comfort us, but they're suffocating us too." Elias listened intently, leaning forward slightly. "You think your people need what? A shake-up?" She nodded. "Yes. My uncle, Chancellor Veros, rules through fear and control. He believes unity comes from uniformity, but I see the cracks beneath the surface. Our society is fragile, Elias. If we don't evolve, if we don't embrace new ideas, we'll collapse under the weight of our own arrogance." Elias hesitated before speaking, choosing his words carefully. "Humans aren't perfect. Far from it. But maybe that's why we survive. We adapt. We fail. We learn. We grow. Maybe that's what your people need." Caliph smiled faintly, her luminous form flickering like candlelight. "That's exactly what I believe. And that's why I chose you." Her confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elias felt a surge of emotion. Pride, fear, hope, all tangled together. "But if you go against your uncle, against everyone, what happens then? You're risking everything." "I know," she said simply. "But leadership isn't about playing it safe. It's about doing what's right, even when it scares you." As the night wore on, they spoke more openly than ever before. Elias shared stories of humanity's struggles, how wars had torn nations apart only for them to rebuild stronger, how science and art flourished in times of adversity. Caliph listened intently, her admiration for him growing with each word. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where humans and Valeri worked side by side, learning from each other instead of fearing differences. But outside the chamber walls, trouble brewed. Rumors of Caliph's growing affection for Elias reached Chancellor Veros, fueling his anger. He summoned his advisors, pacing furiously as he plotted his next move. "She cannot be permitted to disgrace our lineage further," he snapped. "If she insists on this folly, then drastic measures must be taken." One advisor suggested imprisoning Elias, isolating him from Caliph to sever their bond. Another proposed stripping Caliph of her title altogether. Veros considered these options carefully, his crystalline eyes glinting with malice. By morning, orders were given. Guards moved swiftly, surrounding Elias's quarters while he slept. When he awoke to find armed soldiers at his door, his heart sank, but not out of fear for himself. His thoughts immediately turned to Caliph. "Whatever you do," he muttered under his breath, "don't let them win." Meanwhile, Caliph sensed the storm approaching. As whispers of betrayal filled the palace corridors, she prepared herself for battle, not just against her uncle, but against an entire system designed to crush dissent. She knew the road ahead would be perilous, but she also knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to give up without a fight. The days following the Celestial Summit passed in a blur of formalities and ceremonies, but Caliph found her thoughts constantly drifting back to Captain Elias Drake. The human delegation had been given temporary quarters within the palace, their stay extended as a gesture of goodwill. While most of the court dismissed them as insignificant outsiders, Caliph couldn't shake the feeling that there was something extraordinary about these fragile beings, and especially about Elias. One evening, unable to resist her curiosity, Caliph slipped away from her chambers and made her way to the palace archives. The vast library housed centuries of knowledge, its walls lined with glowing crystalline tablets containing records of every species the Velari had encountered. She navigated through the labyrinthine shelves until she reached a section dedicated to Earth and humanity. As she touched one of the tablets, images and texts sprang to life before her eyes. She learned of Earth's turbulent history, wars fought over land, power, and beliefs, civilizations rising and falling like waves on an ocean. Yet amidst the chaos, humanity had shown remarkable resilience. They had built towering cities, explored outer space, and created art that stirred emotions Caliph had never felt herself. Their flaws were undeniable, but so was their capacity for growth. Why do I find them so fascinating? Caliph whispered to herself, tracing the image of a human child laughing in the rain. For all their imperfections, humans seem driven by something primal yet beautiful, a desire to connect, to create, to survive against impossible odds. Her musings were interrupted when she heard footsteps approaching. Quickly, she extinguished the holographic display and turned to see none other than Elias standing at the entrance of the archive. He looked surprised to see her, his hand instinctively reaching for the translator device clipped to his uniform. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly, "I didn't expect to find you here." Caliph hesitated, unsure how to explain her presence. "I could say the same about you, Captain Drake." Elias chuckled nervously. "Just exploring, I guess. Trying to understand your world. It's overwhelming." She studied him carefully, noting the way his fingers fidgeted with the edge of his jacket, the faint creases around his eyes that hinted at exhaustion. There was no pretense in him, no attempt to impress or manipulate, just honesty, a trait she rarely encountered among her own kind. "You seem different from the others," Caliph said finally, her voice soft but probing. "Why did you come here tonight?" Elias shrugged, glancing at the glowing tablets surrounding them. "Back on Earth, we have libraries too, places where people go to learn, to escape. I thought maybe this place would feel familiar." For a moment, they simply stood there, the silence between them filled with unspoken questions. Then Caliph took a step closer, her luminous form casting a gentle glow over the dimly lit room. "Tell me about your people," she said, "not what's written in those records, but who they really are." Elias blinked, caught off guard by her request. Slowly he began to speak, his words flowing haltingly at first, but gaining confidence as he went on. He told her stories of laughter shared under starlit skies, of families coming together during hardships, of dreams pursued despite failure. Each tale painted a picture of a species flawed yet fiercely alive. As he spoke, Caliph felt something stir within her, a warmth she hadn't known existed. It wasn't just fascination anymore. It was admiration, respect, perhaps even something deeper. But such feelings were forbidden, weren't they? She was a princess of the Velari, destined to uphold tradition. Humans were nothing more than guests passing through their world. Yet as Elias finished speaking and met her gaze, Caliph realized she didn't care about the rules. For the first time in her life, she wanted to break free from the chains of expectation. Unbeknownst to them, whispers of their encounter began spreading through the palace corridors. Servants muttered about the princess spending time alone with the human captain. Courtiers exchanged knowing glances, speculating whether Caliph's interest in Elias was merely curiosity or something far more dangerous. And somewhere in the shadows, Chancellor Veros watched silently, his expression unreadable but his mind calculating. If Caliph continued down this path, it would mean trouble, not just for her, but for the entire empire. The trial of sovereignty was a sacred tradition among the Velari, a rite of passage designed to test the strength, wisdom, and resolve of their future rulers. For centuries, it had been an unbroken chain linking one generation of leaders to the next. But this year, Princess Calith intended to break that chain, and not just metaphorically. When the announcement came that it was time for her to undertake the trial, whispers rippled through the court like wind over water. The trial involved navigating the treacherous crystal forests of Valor, a labyrinthine expanse of towering crystalline trees whose shimmering beauty concealed deadly predators and unstable terrain. Traditionally, suitors chosen by the princess accompanied her, vying for her favor while proving their worthiness as potential consorts. But Calith had other plans. Standing before the assembled nobles in the grand hall, she spoke with quiet authority. "I have made my decision," she declared, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Captain Elias Drake will accompany me on the trial." Gasps erupted from the crowd. Courtiers exchanged horrified glances, some muttering under their breath about disrespect and sacrilege. Chancellor Veros stepped forward, his crystalline features glowing faintly with barely contained fury. "Calith," he began, his tone sharp, "this is unprecedented. A human, you shame our traditions." Calith met his gaze without flinching. "Traditions exist to serve us, uncle, not to imprison us. If I am to lead, then I must choose companions who inspire trust and loyalty, not those bound by bloodlines or treaties." Her words hung heavy in the air, daring anyone to challenge her further. No one did. Elias stood off to the side, visibly uncomfortable under the weight of so many disapproving stares. When Calith turned to him, however, her expression softened. "Are you ready?" she asked simply. He nodded, swallowing hard. "As ready as I'll ever be." The journey into the crystal forest began at dawn. Towering spires of translucent crystal stretched toward the sky, refracting sunlight into dazzling rainbows that danced across the forest floor. To Elias, it looked like something out of a dream. But he knew better than to let its beauty lull him into complacency. Beneath the surface, danger lurked. Calith moved gracefully through the forest, her radiant form blending seamlessly with the shimmering surroundings. She carried no weapons. The Valari relied on their telepathic abilities and agility rather than brute force. Elias, on the other hand, clutched a makeshift spear crafted from materials scavenged during their preparations. He felt painfully out of place, every step reminding him how alien this world truly was. Their first test came sooner than expected. As they crossed a narrow bridge formed by intertwined crystal vines, the ground beneath them began to tremble. From the shadows emerged a pack of Valari predators, sleek, wolf-like creatures with jagged crystalline teeth. Their eyes glowed with predatory intent as they circled the pair. Calith raised her hands, focusing her energy. Her body pulsed with light, creating a barrier that forced the creatures back momentarily. "Stay close," she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. Elias gripped his spear tightly, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Though terrified, he refused to freeze. Instead, he positioned himself between Calith and the nearest predator, jabbing the spear forward when it lunged too close. The creature yelped and retreated, giving Calith enough time to reinforce her barrier and drive the rest away. When the danger passed, Calith turned to Elias, her expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "You could have run." "I don't abandon people who trust me," he replied, breathing heavily. "Even if they're, well, technically aliens." A flicker of amusement crossed her face before she nodded. "Thank you." Over the next few days, the trials grew more intense. They faced collapsing bridges, toxic mists, and even illusions designed to prey on their deepest fears. Through it all, Calith and Elias relied on each other, their bond strengthening with every challenge. Calith marveled at Elias's resourcefulness and determination, traits she admired but rarely saw in her own kind. And Elias found himself awestruck by Calith's courage and grace, qualities that reminded him why he'd risked everything to help her. By the time they reached the heart of the forest, a massive crystalline tree known as the Axis Spire, They were exhausted but triumphant. As they stood together beneath its glowing canopy, Calith realized something profound. The trial wasn't just about proving herself as a leader. It was about choosing someone who understood her vision, a partner willing to defy convention for the sake of something greater. And in that moment, she knew Elias was exactly that person. The aftermath of the battle left Lumina Prime scared but alive, its crystalline spires fractured in places, yet still glowing faintly under the light of distant stars. The once oppressive palace now stood as a symbol of change, a testament to the power of unity and defiance against tyranny. Calith walked through its halls, her steps deliberate and steady, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the promise of renewal. With Chancellor Veros defeated and his loyalists either captured or fled, Calith ascended to the throne as Empress of the Vaylari. Her coronation was unlike any other in history. Instead of grand ceremonies filled with rigid traditions, she invited representatives from every species who had fought alongside her. Humans, rogue traders, disenfranchised aliens, all standing together as equals. Elias stood by her side, his presence a quiet declaration that love transcended boundaries. In her first address to the galaxy, Calith spoke not as a ruler but as a leader. "For too long, we have built walls between ourselves," she said, her voice resonating through the assembly hall. "We've believed ourselves superior because of our differences, rather than celebrating them. But today we begin anew. Today, we choose cooperation over control, growth over stagnation, and hope over fear." Her words sparked cheers among the gathered crowd, many of whom had never imagined such a future possible. For the first time in centuries, the Vaylari Empire opened its borders fully, welcoming ideas, cultures, and technologies from across the stars. Trade routes expanded, scientific collaborations flourished, and embassies were established on planets previously ignored or exploited. Elias became an ambassador of sorts, bridging the gap between humanity and the Vaylari. His role wasn't just symbolic. He worked tirelessly to ensure Earth's inclusion in this new galactic order. Under his guidance, human engineers shared innovations with Vaylari scientists, while Vaylari healers brought advanced medical techniques to Earth's struggling communities. Together, they proved that two vastly different species could create something stronger than the sum of their parts. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Resistance lingered in pockets of the Empire, remnants of Veros' regime determined to restore the old ways. Assassination attempts were made, rebellion sparked in remote systems. Yet each challenge only strengthened Calith's resolve. She traveled extensively, meeting with dissenters and listening to their grievances, not to silence them, but to understand. Slowly, trust began to replace fear. Through it all, Calith and Elias remained inseparable. Their bond deepened with time, becoming not just a partnership but a beacon of hope for others. They faced challenges together, celebrated victories together, and dreamed of futures neither had dared imagine alone. Their union was officially recognized during a simple ceremony attended by close friends and allies. There were no elaborate rituals, just heartfelt vows exchanged beneath the shimmering canopy of the crystal forest, where their journey had truly begun. One evening, as the galaxy settled into a fragile peace, Calith and Elias found themselves back on the grand balcony of Lumina Prime. The view hadn't changed. The endless expanse of stars stretched out before them, infinite and unknowable. But everything else had. Calith leaned against the railing, her hand resting lightly on Elias's. "Do you think we can keep this going?" Elias asked softly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This unity." Calith smiled, her luminous form casting a gentle glow around them. "It won't always be easy. There will be setbacks, disagreements, moments when it feels like we're failing. But as long as there are people willing to fight for something better, then yes, I believe we can." Elias nodded, squeezing her hand. "Then I'll fight with you, always." As they stood there, bathed in starlight, the galaxy seemed vast and full of possibilities. Calith knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, But she also knew one thing for certain. The spark she and Elias had ignited would continue to burn brightly, lighting the way for generations to come. And so, under the watchful eyes of countless stars, a new chapter began, not just for the Velari or humanity, but for all beings brave enough to dream of a brighter tomorrow.